is Miss Bacigalupi's second camp with Camp Constitution. This is her only class this summer at Camp Constitution. She is an entrepreneur, a lady of great enthusiasm. She is a cattle rancher, or has been. Are you still?
Yep.
Yes, still.
Proud of it.
And proud of it. She has been a co-producer or the inspiration for certain productions, such as Blue and No Water, No Farmer, No Food, and also Wolves in Government Clothing. But she loves America, and she comes almost as far away from Camp Constitution as Lord Moncton. He had to go over the water. She had to go over the land. She comes from California. Let's give her a great, warm Camp Constitution welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for having me again. Hi, Camp Constitution. I have an update, if I can find my cell phone somewhere in this mess, but since I can't, those of you who attended the optional class yesterday about veganism, or sorry, you are not a vegan, nor are you a vegetarian, this is a good thing, guys. So good, right? That it's impossible to be a vegan or vegetarian. It simply is. And if you were in the class yesterday, you would have heard all the livestock byproducts that you and I use, you're touching right now. If you've got your smartphone, or when you get your smartphone back, your smartphone is a livestock byproduct. But really, in the 21st century in modern day society, it is impossible to be vegan or vegetarian. Now, you may not put the food down your throat per se, like meat or a hamburger or fish or whatever, but the byproducts that you use, which is called consumption, you consume something. Right now, you consumed your shirt, you bought it, it is a consumptive item, was brought to you, everything was brought to you by transportation, like a truck, for example. And that truck not only has lubricants in its motor, lubricants in its to make its tires go round, but the tires itself are livestock byproduct. And the asphalt that those trucks drive on, livestock byproduct. So by virtue of all products being brought to us by livestock, and by fossil fuel, and by carbon, you are not a vegan or a vegetarian. Now, a friend of mine, a friend of ours, Mark Morano, who wrote this awesome book. If there's a book to get right now to combat all your friends saying, no, global warming is real, and 97% of scientists say, and the sea is rising, this is the book that is so well written that even someone like me, who does not have, seriously, I'm not like whining about it. I do not have the IQ of these gentlemen here. I just don't. I have other talents, I have other, mechanisms that make me exceptional in different ways, but my brain is not one of them. But my ability to communicate with people who aren't as smart as they are, they can't, communicate as well as I can to someone who has, the brain that I do. So that's an advantage I have over these guys. They are like this. I hang out with some of these guys at conferences, and it's all these amazing scientists. And over the past 10 years, as I've been attending these science conferences, it was like a foreign language to me. When I first started going to United Nations conferences, it was like a foreign language to me. All this stuff about sustainability and resilience and words you hear all the time. 10 years ago, these words were not being talked about. They should have been, but they weren't. So anyway, Mark Morano, who wrote this book, The Politically Incorrect Guide to Climate Change, I call this, it's a golden book, right? Golden in color. I call this the golden book of golden nuggets. It truly is. Golden nuggets for people like me who believe in their research and know that, things like, hey, if global warming was really, really, truly happening, don't you think that someone like Al Gore, who has many mansions, I've seen his mansion in Santa Barbara. In fact, my friend and I did a little Facebook video in front of Al Gore's mansion talking about his carbon footprint. Don't you think that if world were in dire straits, as Al Gore would have us believe, don't you think that he would be the first one walking the talk?
No.
Don't you think? Anybody want to answer that? Do you agree with me? Don't you think he'd be saying, wait a minute, I better lead the way in this? Can I see some heads anyway, just to say that they're all alive in here? So, I mean, and Leonardo DiCaprio, right? Handsome guy. He's been in charge of the oceans now under the United Nations. So he's the spokesperson for the oceans of the world under the United Nations, wanting to save the oceans. Do you know that after they gave him that honor, he rented a yacht that was like $3 million a week to go down, to cruise down to Brazil to watch a soccer game? I mean, you see the hypocrisy? It's unreal. So anyway, Mark Morano has this terrific book, and he also has a website called Climate Depot. And in Climate Depot, he posts every single day some amazing articles. Some written by Willie, or some comments by Willie, or tweets, or articles that he's finding in newspapers. It's kind of like one of those one-stop shops to go and find out what is going on with this thing called climate change and what's being put out there in the world. Well, something that he just put was an article about veganism and vegetarianism, and its push so that we will all move to a plant-based diet to save planet Earth from cattle and methane and burps and farts from my cows. And so anyway, it's quite astonishing because this article does not cover livestock byproducts. It's suggesting that perhaps you do not have to reduce your meat consumption as they're telling you. They want you to eventually go to 100% vegan diet. Who's the they? I'll keep saying they. They is the United Nations, people like Al Gore, and anyone you want the they to mean. And they are mostly theys who do not believe in the United States of America anymore. Perhaps they did at one point, but somewhere they went down a different route, and they are pushing a whole different agenda for the 21st century than you and I had ever imagined someone who was supposed to support and protect the U.S. Constitution would. And those are the facts, unfortunately. We are living in a day that I never thought I'd see in America when I was a child. So anyway, the politically incorrect guide to climate change, Climate Depot, those are so good, two very good resources. Now, if you remember last year, how many were here last year and saw my presentation on Mama Bear? You remember Mama Bear? Yeah. And I said I don't have children, but oh man, the Mama Bear has come out in me. Well, I've been to a couple more United Nations meetings since I last saw you. In fact, today, I just got accepted to the next United Nations meeting in Salt Lake City, and I'll show you my acceptance letter. But anyway, so some of the things that you probably remember in Mama Bear is I said that, even Mama Bears know that there are no free lunches. Not everyone gets a free ride. But in the 21st century, remember Obama, he wanted everybody to have a free phone. They want us to have free health care. They want us to have free education. If you can, channel in Alexandria Communist, she wants free health care and free education for everyone. But anyone who owns something knows. For example, a rental car. How many of you treat a rental car better or return it better than you found it? When you go to rent a car, how about a library book? Does a library book end up better or more used after you take it back to the library, if you still use libraries? But if it's yours and you want to protect it and you want to save it forever, don't you think it's obvious that you're going to take better care of it? When you guys get your first car, if you haven't already, man, is that such a treat, especially when you've had to work really hard to get it. And I did. I got a repo car. They shipped it from Texas. It didn't even run when I first got it. Turned 16, I wanted a car. So my dad said, okay, we'll get a car. I worked. And then the car that showed up was a car that did not run. But I had to help my dad redo the engine, fix the engine, then we had to paint it and all these things. And the lesson was that, you know, if you're going to own something, you got to learn how to run it properly and take care of it. And what a great lesson. But in this 21st century, and the agenda for the 21st century, it is not about ownership. And that is what the United States of America was founded on. The idea to own property, for example. To have power of your own life. For example, can man govern himself? We are the experiment. And we've only been around for a short time compared to European history. So, what we have here is really fragile. It's really special. People risk life and limb to get here. They break laws to get here. And now we're paying for their health care and their education for those people who do not honor our laws. So anyway, we also talked about, we mentioned Alexandria Communists already. And this is a new enemy since I last saw you. These are called how many have heard of Justice Democrats? Very scary. Justice Democrats are pushing what is called the Sunshine Movement. They're pushing the Green New Deal, which is not new. If you remember the 2016 presidential election, Jill Stein, Communist Party USA or Green Party USA, ran on the Green New Deal. So it's not new, but somehow Alexandria Communists has gotten a lot of attention. And it's okay with me, because as we, Lord Monckton, many, many years, Willie, talking about Agenda 21 and what is going on with the hoax that is climate change and man-made global warming, we've been trying to alert our fellow Americans, and Hal and so many others, and John McManus, so many others have been trying to alert the American people on what's happening. That there's this new Green Deal coming through, and it's not new, it's old, it's ugly, it's raw, it's bad. But if we do not stop this now, I don't know if we ever will, and now's the chance. You heard earlier that, and you hear this all the time, Trump took us out of the Paris Agreement. He did not. He took the first step to get us out of the Paris Agreement. The next step is to get him elected, and in 2020, if he is not elected, and we get a Democrat like Kamala Harris or a Justice Democrat, guys, we are done. That is no hype, it is no joke. Because these people believe in the Green New Deal. And what is the Green New Deal? Somebody want to say, what goes away in the Green New Deal? What can't we have? I know you guys know about the Green New Deal. You can just say it, you don't have to raise your hand. Nobody can remember? Somebody want to give them a hint? Did you all fly here? Didn't Alexandria Communists say no more planes? No more cows? No more burping, farting cows? Didn't she say we have to retrofit all buildings? Yes, sir.
Pretty much all conveniences taken away.
Absolutely. All conveniences taken away. It's a huge transformation of life itself. But Obama warned us. Back in 2014, he said, no, when he got elected president and he was in his inaugural speech, he said, we are 5 days away from fundamentally transforming the United States of America. Who in here wants to fundamentally transform the United States of America? Raise your hand. If you do, it's not a big deal. You might not have a lot of friends after this, but anyway. So here's what the Justice Democrats are all about. Polling data demonstrates the Democratic Party's base of voters are ready for more progressive agenda. More progressive. Are you guys ready for a more progressive agenda than what the Democrats have been giving us so far? Though the party elites may be divided, the base is not. They are ready for unabashed progressive politicians. Unabashed, meaning anything goes. It's rough. They will do anything to get elected, and they have no problem doing that. You can look up Justice Democrats and find out which Justice Democrats are running in your area. I know my Congressman Doug LaMalfa is running against a Justice Democrat who calls herself a farmer named Audrey Denny. And I don't know any farmer who would want the Green New Deal. So what is unabashed? Not embarrassed, not disconcerted, not ashamed. Does that define Alexandria Communist and her behavior? Even the old Democrats, the old guard rather, are a bit disturbed by her behavior. And I also told you last year that kids are being taught to confront their parents. So, and I showed you a couple slides, we'll go through those later. The Justice Democrats want Medicare for all, the Green New Deal, and racial justice. Yes, sir?
If she got elected president, how would she push the Green New Deal? Because we have plans to have a car and everything else. So how would she stop that?
So can you say it really loud, please?
It said if she got elected, how would she pass the Green New Deal?
Like Kamala Harris or a Justice Democrat, how would they pass it? Well, just like we got Agenda 21, and most people are afraid to talk about it, and I'll show you a slide where. Through executive order, the president can pass executive orders that apply to the federal government. And then through the federal government agencies, like the Department of Interior, they have to fulfill on that executive order. Executive orders do not apply to you and me, but they do apply to the agencies within the government. Whether they're constitutional or not originally, it still applies. So they do it through the federal agencies, and then eventually it gets passed down to us. And we'll talk about that too, and that's a really good question. That's a great question. They are, right now, doing a tour around the United States called the Road to the Green New Deal Tour. This is very scary. So they're getting a lot of attention out there. Where we here in Camp Constitution, I believe this is the room that should be getting a lot of attention. Because I don't know any other group, you guys, besides you, who are doing this right now. Who are doing even like learning the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and how important it is. You know, I don't mean to sound, I don't know, but to have Dr. Willie Soon, the leading astrophysicist in the world, John McManus in the room, who's been battling this issue for decades, same with Hal. Lord Christopher Monckton, who comes from the EU, Margaret Thatcher's senior policy advisor, in this room. It is phenomenal. And I just think you guys are so lucky. And I think that, you know, if Hal had this, you know, when I was growing up, you know, I don't know where I'd be right now. But I hope I'd be where you're sitting now, learning the importance of who we are as Americans and what we fought for to flee tyrannical rule, just like Chrisanne Hall taught us last year. So anyway, at this point, we are heading for a train wreck. And that is no joke. I don't mean this to scare you. I hope to accomplish this evening, one, to, you know, have you, provide you enough information that you are like, even if it's just a 1 or 2 or 3 things, that you can go away from Camp Constitution about Agenda 21, really talking about it loudly and proudly, because it is a real thing. The Green New Deal, I promise at this point we are going to get some form of the Green New Deal. Why? Because Congress, our Republicans in Congress, are not standing up to this stuff. In fact, they are afraid to even talk about Agenda 21, which is ridiculous. It is maddening. So anyway, we will at this point get some portion of the Green New Deal. And so if you remember Reverend Clark's presentation about where we are on the left-right paradigm, we are moving further and further away from the U.S. Constitution and further to communism. Daniel Webster said, if all my possessions were taken from me with one exception, I would choose to keep the power of communication, for by it I would soon regain all the rest. So what is he saying? He's saying that right now, under the First Amendment, you have your freedom of speech. There's 5 rights in the First Amendment, and if we are not using them, we're losing, you know, one, if not all of them. But you still have the power of communication. You've got social media, you've got your smartphones, you've got, you know, old forms, old ways of communicating. This century, you guys have more ways to communicate with other people than we ever had, and that's an awesome thing. And also in city council meetings, because of Greta Thunberg, who Willie mentioned earlier this morning, Greta Thunberg, the 15-year-old who is probably going to get a Nobel Peace Prize, she's got her own TED Talk now. She's probably going to get her doctorate if she hasn't already at age 15. She is making that the power of youth she's just using the opportunity of showing up to city council meetings to have her voice heard. How many of you have gone to city council meetings? We should all be going to city council meetings because the city council meetings are about every aspect of our lives. So really important that you have your voices heard. I ran for Congress in 2012, and it was an exciting year. I started to run in the election. I started to run halfway through the election was over. So in May, I put in my paperwork, and that gave me May to June to win the primary to go on to the general. And in California, we have a system called Top 2 Go. So that means if there's two, by the time the primary is, if there's two Democrats who have the most votes, then those two Democrats go to the general election. And so I was lucky to win in San Francisco one of those two spots. But the real reason I ran was not to be an Alexandria Communist, but was to have a platform where I got to speak about what I'm so passionate about, and that is United Nations Agenda 21, Sustainable Development. And what Agenda 21, simply, if you don't recall from last year, is, does anybody want to say what it is? Can someone tell me what it is? How about you ladies in the back, in the very back? The question was, what is Agenda 21? Agenda 21 is the agenda for the 21st century, and we're going to get a little bit deeper into it. Now, this is my ranch. That's my horse Freedom, and those are our black Angus cows, and those are clouds. It's not methane. It's not killing the environment. Those are natural. They're not caused by our cows, our meat cows. They eat grass. They're beautiful. Lord Monckton has been to the ranch in a very cold time. He came and spoke in where I'm from. He is so gracious to go wherever people bring him and pay for his expenses, and so I invite you to, he will come. If you want your neighborhood, your community to hear from Lord Monckton, invite him. In 2014, I dressed up as a pig, as you may remember. That's me, and I'm carrying a No on Prop 1 sign. And the Prop 1 sign says no more environmental pork. So I dressed up as a pig, pork, to say, look, this Proposition 1, the water bond bill in California, is not about more water storage. That was back in 2014. We have not gotten one more dam or one more storage lake since 2014, even though we were promised under a $15 billion bond that we would get more water storage. But what do you think the environmentalists are going to do once somebody starts to try and build a storage pond? They're going to sue under some endangered species and some violation under United Nations Agenda 21 that somehow we are killing planet Earth by putting in a storage pond. So one of my ways of expressing, my communication was to dress up as a pig. And you may recall, I took this book with me while I was dressed up as a pig on Southwest Airlines. And so people are like, oh, are you a mascot? And I'm like, no, I'm not a mascot. I'm asking you to vote no on Prop 1 because according to this document right here that we are now following, all water should be controlled by the United Nations. And they're like, what? Anyway, Prop 1 ended up passing, unfortunately, overwhelmingly, and people are now realizing several years later that we have no new water storage. And we just had some pretty awful wildfires last year. This is my family, they're good people, and we care about our animals. So when we get told, we go to some of these U.S. Fish and Wildlife meetings, like about the wolves, and I remember one where they, in Sacramento, California, where they bust in, the government and radical environmental groups bust in about 400 people from mostly the Bay Area. And I'll never forget my dad standing up doing testimony saying, look, I used to hunt in Wyoming and there's not the wildlife that there used to be because of the wolves situation. And somebody shouted out without getting reprimanded or asked to leave, shouted out, you should be shot. and so to my dad, and I'll never forget that. It's, I hope you don't have someone ever say that to your parents, but anyway, that's what goes on out there. Now I have a proposition for all you. I passed it by Hal already. Is $500 a lot of money? Do you guys think it's a lot of money? Like if somebody said, I'm going to give you $500, would you turn it down? Okay, great. So Hal and I were talking earlier. The United Nations, let me just add this. The United Nations, as I will show you in just a bit, has so many young people attending their meetings now. Has so many people like Greta Thunberg who are their marching order, marching the United Nations orders into a one world governance system. So Hal and I were talking about how we do not have young people really pushing against that and promoting the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights and the Declaration of Independence. And I would state that I bet it's pretty scary these days to do that. I don't know. I'm not young, but I know anymore. But I do know it's even frightening for me. Not as much as it used to, because I've been practicing for the last 10, 15 years on getting educated, and now I own the information in my head so I can speak about it loudly and proudly. So here's the deal or whatever. By next year, if you can show us, and Hal will work with you throughout the year, I'll work with you. You show up next year, so your parents are going to pay for your tuition to get here. So this is just $500 cash to you as a gift from me to say, wow, thank you so much for being a patriot for the U.S. Constitution and speaking against the United Nations. And we'll give you documents. I've got a couple documents that you can use here. You can have blue. That's also a gift so that you can see what kind of things that people say to other people about stopping this radical environmentalism. So anyway, we'll give you what you need to learn what you need about Agenda 21. And then in your community, and this can look like however you want it to look like. We just want to see some results. Like maybe, perhaps, you talked to 10 people in your community, you did a survey, and these 10 people prior to you telling them about Agenda 21, for example, and how it's being implemented in your area, knew nothing about it. And then perhaps you convince them, encourage them to go to a city council meeting. Really, it can look like anything you want. In fact, Hal's going to share tonight at the campfire some of the things that he's done to make a difference in his community besides even doing Camp Constitution. So anyway, it can look like anything you want. And next year, you could share. We'll do an awards ceremony. You'll get a check for cash or whatever for $500. And it's really simple. But the idea is that you educate yourself and then educate your community about this thing called United Nations Agenda 21. Deal? Is anybody thinking maybe I can do it? Anybody slightly? Okay. A couple people. Okay, and maybe some of the other parents might want to chip in and we can have 2 people. Anyway, okay, good. So very excited about that. Because really the only way we're going to get our nation back to anything that it was when our founding fathers said, hey, look, I don't want that tyrannical rule anymore, is by us getting activated, us getting engaged, and us making a difference. The United Nations and all these kids are way ahead of us, and I don't mean to discourage you, because man, the truth is so much fun, and you have truth on your side. Okay, so you could go to a United Nations conference with me, and that would get you that $500. In fact, if you can get into the United Nations conference, I'll pay your whole way. Okay, so they are doing things like the United Nations Habitat World Urban Forum, number 9. I got back from Malaysia. That's where Willie Soon is from. And what they're pushing at this conference is something called Cities for All. Under United Nations Agenda 21, the agenda for the 21st century, over 80% of the world's population will live in cities by the year 2050. In fact, they'd like to make it even sooner than that. The reason for that is they say that human beings are causing so much damage to planet Earth, the biodiversity, the plants, the climate, that if we all lived in stack and pack housing in cities, then we might be able to save planet Earth. This is National Geographic's 2 months ago edition, and it talks about cities, it talks about climate change, it talks about reducing our carbon footprint. National Geographic is even talking about it. In December, this is just December recently, my friend Alex Newman we went to Poland, to what is Katowice, Poland. This was the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change Conference, or Convention of Parties number 24. And the reason for this conference was to implement the rules for the Paris Agreement, which we are not out of. We've taken the first step to be out of it, but we need to be out. We need Trump in office, or somebody else who is not for the Paris Agreement in office in the 2020 election. I won a Fossil of the Day award. This guy is, sorry, that's not Fossil, but yeah, that is Fossil. This guy is Fossil, and they gave me an award because I'm like, I'm not falling for this stuff. So they handed me, and they sang a song to me. And here, Alex Newman and I are toasting over a piece of meat. Al Gore was there too. In fact, this is my photo. I love to take pictures, and I had my big zoom lens, and so the United Nations, thinking that I was a journalist, like a full-on journalist. Huge room. This is where the delegates of the United Nations go in and make. Lord Monckton actually, didn't you crash one of the delegate meetings? And
Officially banned.
And he was officially banned from the United Nations. And then he tried to, what sport did you try and do? And skydive into one of the United Nations meetings. So we have fun at these meetings. They're not all serious, and we try and mock them, and politely. But anyway, so this is Al Gore, and man, oh man, he is not a nice guy, and I'm not just saying that lightly. So here is my latest, so I'm going to, this is I just got accepted today, July 30th. The 68th United Nations Civil Society Conference. Guys, I didn't even know they had a civil society conference until the other day, and this is the 68th one. And it's in Salt Lake City. Why aren't we being told about these things? So if you read in their data, it says over 4,000 civil society representatives from around the world to talk about how we can implement the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and how to reduce our carbon footprint to save planet Earth from global warming. Their hashtags are going to be these: UN with civil society. But if the civil society had any clue, if your neighbors had any clue, the ultimate goals of United Nations Agenda 21, I don't even think the United Nations would exist anymore. And we're going to find out more about the United Nations from John McManus tomorrow, I think tomorrow. So this is Al Gore, as you can see, and no, he is not crying. That is sweat. And if I lied as badly and as much as he did too, I would be sweating also. And then I see this thing. As United Nations Agenda 21 and the transformation of society, unlike we've ever seen before, goes into transhumanism and robots, I just can't help but think Al Gore is plugged into his master, But of all the conferences I've ever been to, which has been a lot, because I think we deserve the truth, and I know we're not getting the truth, and I go to these conferences to gain the truth for myself, and I come back and I share through presentations and camp constitutions, and Willie and I just spoke at one of my most scary conferences, because truly when I walked into the room, the IQ of the room went down. These are doctors, medical doctors, PhDs, and Willie asked me to come speak because most of these doctors do not know about Agenda 21 or understand the implications of it. So anyway, I forgot my train of thought. So of all the conferences I've gone to, this most recent one in Poland was the most disturbing. And let me just play this video. Actually, before we go there. I had heard through the halls of the Katowice conference, by the way, it was in December, freezing cold, sub-zero weather. So they had a global warming conference in a sub-zero location. And at night, Alex Newman and I enjoyed doing videos of the big diesel trucks coming in to fuel the United Nations conference. The entire, imagine 34,000 people at one conference. They brought in the entire building structure for this conference. So it was in a big park-like area, but they brought in the entire buildings. The air conditioning, the heating, the subflooring, the plants, all the decor, the mics, the videos, all the registration equipment. We had tons of UN police with guns, as they're pushing for open borders and no more guns. They get a pass when it comes to all of that. And as you're walking the halls, it's extraordinary. It's mind-blowing. And it's just filled with nothing but hypocrisy, as they're saying, human beings, because we consume so many things and we build so many things that we are causing degradation. But they give themselves a pass. And as I was walking through the halls, interviewing a lot of people, I saw a bunch of children wearing masks. And I went over to where they were gathered, and I overheard them saying that they were going to go sing later on. Oh, where are you singing? Oh, we're singing in the Pacific Islands booth at 5:30. Okay, great. So I'm going to be there. So at 5:30, I went over, and there are all these children. It's the Katowice Children's Choir. They're adorable. And they're sitting on the floor. And the Pacific Island bureaucrats are saying, and I have this on my phone, I videotaped it all, that if you children don't convince your parents and your friends to act now. What did Alexandria Communists say? We have 12 years to act. And unless we act now, planet Earth will be uninhabitable and unrecognizable. And that is what they were saying all over this conference. By the way, that was before Alexandria Communists on December 14th spouted out about the Green New Deal. So somehow she had gotten this communication, but anyway, these children are being told, unless you act now, children, our islands will be underwater. Could you imagine the burden? And it's all a lie. Because if you recall Al Gore's 10-year tipping point, it was 10 years, by the year, I think, 2016, that Miami would be underwater if we all did not live a sustainable development lifestyle. So after these children were lectured on if they do not change their lifestyle and if they cannot encourage their friends and family to change their lifestyle, they all stood up to sing. They put on their gas masks and sang a song. And what you won't see in this video is on the side is a video screen. And it's all kind of weather changing in the video screen, from sun to rainbows to clouds to floods, everything under the sun. And didn't Solomon say there's nothing new under the sun? But they would have you believe that all this change in weather and rain and thunderstorms and lightning and hurricanes and droughts is something new. It's not. It's just part of Earth's cycle. So anyway, here it goes. And this is why I do what I do. Because these are innocent minds being stolen for things they don't quite understand. And yet they're being used to push this agenda.
Fire. 'Cause I cannot breathe today. My world is on fire. 'Cause I cannot breathe today. My world is on fire. 'Cause I cannot breathe today. My world is on fire. 'Cause I cannot breathe today. My world is on fire. 'Cause I cannot breathe today. My world is on fire. 'Cause I cannot breathe today. My world is on fire. 'Cause I cannot breathe today. My world is on fire. 'Cause I cannot breathe today. My world is on fire. 'Cause I cannot breathe today. My world is on fire. 'Cause I cannot breathe today. My world is on fire. 'Cause I cannot breathe today. My world is on fire. 'Cause I cannot breathe today. My world is on fire. 'Cause I cannot breathe today. My world is on fire. 'Cause I cannot breathe today. My world is on fire. 'Cause I cannot breathe today. My world is on fire. 'Cause I cannot breathe today. My world is on fire. 'Cause I
Does that disturb you as much as it disturbs me? This is abuse. They are being told lies. They are making life decisions based on lies. They are being told that they need to save planet Earth. It is up to them because people like us aren't going to help them. And I can tell you, I heard this all throughout this conference, and I came away so mad that I knew that even though I said this is my last conference ever because it is just evil, pure evil. Anybody who would do anything like that to children, just wicked. So, and now you know I'm going to my next conference in the end of August. So, obviously it didn't last too long because we have children to save, truly. What the children are being taught, not just children, all the way through college, is that the only way to save planet Earth is through something called sustainable development. And where's sustainable development? Right in the middle of these three things. Social equity, social justice. Can anybody tell me what social equity or social justice is, please? You hear about racism all the time? Let's even the playing field. What about women? We need the same pay as men. We're not doing the same job most of the time. I'm sorry, I cannot do the same job that requires muscle, and a man might get a job done. You know what? I'm sorry, life isn't fair, and it isn't fair that it's not fair, but we were given a certain playing deck, and you make the best out of it. I'm not mad, I'm just passionate, by the way. All right, economic justice. What's economic justice?
Redistribution.
Redistribution of what? Whose wealth? Yours. The wealth that you haven't even created yet. They're spending it already. All right, and environmental justice. This is no joke. Rocks have rights. There's a river in New Zealand that has human rights right now. What can that river now do that it couldn't do before? Sue. Who said sue? Yes, exactly. In the United States, there are laws being pushed right now by radical animal rights groups who are trying to move us from animal ownership to animal guardianship or guardians of animal. If you're a guardian, what can that animal do? Sue. A brilliant speaker would be Mindy Patterson in the future. You remember this? All today, for those of you who joined us on the hike, everywhere from the museum all the way to Hal Shurtleff's coffee cup and the ice cream bar. Did you know he snuck in and had coffee and ice cream while we were all like exercising? But I caught Hal Shurtleff and I saw what was on his cups. It was all about sustainability and being green. The signs are everywhere. And once you learn about Agenda 21 and you do research, you will see it everywhere. In fact, you cannot avoid it. You cannot get away with it. They're talking about it all the time on TV. And there are signs, everywhere there are signs that point to this direction. You see them, don't you? All right, so FedEx is a great example of how once we see something that we could not see before, you can never unsee it. In other words, once you see it, you can never, ever, ever not see it. Does that make sense? So how many see the arrow? You see it? If you didn't see it before, you can never unsee it again. So the next time a FedEx truck comes by, you will most certainly see that arrow. In fact, it might be the first thing that you see. This is green2deepgreen.org. You remember those 3 E's of sustainable development? Where sustainability is in the middle? You see that? See how now easy it is to see. This is Boy Scouts of America. Boy Scouts of America quotes the United Nations on sustainable development. Sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. That is from the United Nations. It's from this document. Gru Harlem Brundtland in 1980s who wrote this document. So why are we just now hearing about this thing called sustainable development when this book, the United Nations, launched this to the world in the 1980s? Here's why. They didn't want us to know about this plan, because if we knew the details of this plan, let me tell you, none of us would be for this. So I called, as you may remember from last year, I mentioned how I called Boy Scouts of America as soon as I saw that this is what they're pushing. Boy Scouts hung up on me several times. They said, you need to read our website. And I'm looking at their website and I'm saying, I'm reading it right now. You are pushing the United Nations, and the United Nations does not believe in private property. In fact, in one of the 3 E's, social equity, not everybody has the desire or can earn enough to own private property. So in the United Nations' eyes, views of the world, then nobody should own private property except for maybe them. You can get your sustainability merit badge by tattling on your family and having your family change its behavior when it comes to consumptive patterns. In other words, what you buy from a grocery store, or how you spend your evening. They suggest in this document, this PDF called How to Get Your Sustainability Merit Badge, that perhaps you shouldn't be watching TV. Instead, you should be playing a guitar. I'm sorry. It's none of their business what I do in between the 4 walls that I call my home. And they have, this is their new website. This is the face of their new website, Leave No Trace. I like to think that I'm partly responsible for their new website, since I called them several times, teaching them. And so within this website you could see, but sustainability means more than just leaving no trace. Here's the point. At Boy Scouts of America, one of their tenets now is to push sustainable development. Where did sustainable development come from? Who brought us sustainable development? What organization brought us sustainable development? The United Nations. But sustainability means more than just leaving no trace. It means leaving a legacy. Now you wonder, I often wonder this. Al Gore must know he's lying. He must. He refuses to debate people like Lord Christopher Monckton. He refuses to debate people like Willie Soon. Why? If he's telling the truth and he knows the facts, why? He's an attorney, isn't he? Doesn't he have his law degree? Even if he didn't, he was a politician and he was a vice president. Debates are no big deal for the guy. So why does he refuse to debate people on this thing called man-made global warming? Doesn't it make you go, huh? I wonder. But he has a legacy to leave now. Could you imagine someone like Al Gore saying, you guys, sorry, I made a mistake. I haven't been telling you the truth. I'm doing an about face. No, because he has decades under his belt about talking about the 10-year tipping point that Miami would already be underwater. He would have egg on his face and look like a fool. And he makes tons and tons of money with this narrative. So anyway, they have a sustainability summit in West Virginia. So for those of you near West Virginia, it might be fun to go to those things and find out what they're all up to. Anyway, now you can get here's what your sustainability merit badge looks like. Right there, oops, the 3 E's, the recycle, reuse, reduce. And this is Common Core. We talked about this last year. I won't wear lipstick. Why is lipstick bad? Because it's livestock byproduct and fossil fuel and also carbon. And I'll only drink half a cup of coffee, Dad said, but Judy could hardly hear him over the grinding of the rainforest coffee beans. Her family sure knew how to ruin a perfectly good Mr. Rubbish mood. She put on her jeans and her Spotted Owl t-shirt, and if you're from the Pacific Northwest, you know that there has been an agenda to stop lumber and timbering because of this thing called the Spotted Owl. And just recently, and I shared this last year, the Department of Fish and Game, now Fish and Wildlife in California, because it's not about game anymore, it's about rewilding America and the world, stated that they made a mistake. It's not timbering of old forest that that's reducing the spotted owl population. The spotted owl population is mating with the barred owl. And so therefore, the population is reduced, and Fish and Game has given itself a pass to now kill bardows. So you can see it's not about the species and it's not about the environment. It's about an agenda. So here's your lunch, Mom said. What's wrong with that? Don't you get it, said Judy. They cut down trees to make paper bags. Trees provide shade and stop us and help control what? Global warming. This is a 3rd grade United States Common Core reader. Who said, he alone who owns the youth gains the future? Communist Hitler. I only have a few minutes, but I want to share a few more things. Let me read to you what Agenda 21 is. We're not going to get in, hopefully I'll get to President George Herbert Walker Bush talking about Agenda 21 and Nancy Pelosi. Effective execution, I'm reading from a document via Executive Order 12852, the President's Council on Sustainable Development, 1993, who was president in 1993. Who was president in 1993? He got impeached. He doesn't tell the truth. Yes, sir. Thank you very much, Bill Clinton. And who was vice president? Al Gore. Oh, isn't that coincidental? Because in that year, their very first year as president and vice president, they created Executive Order 12852, the President's Council on Sustainable Development. Effective execution of Agenda 21 will require a profound reorientation of all human society, unlike anything the world has ever experienced before. A major shift in the priorities of both governments and individuals, and an unprecedented redeployment of human and financial resources. This shift will demand that a concern for the environmental consequences of every human action. Name a human action you are up to right now. Breathing. This shift will demand that a concern for the environmental consequences of every human action be integrated into individual and collective decision-making at every level. It is now my business under Obamacare what you eat, what you drive, how far away you live from a hospital. It's my business. Why? Because we're all paying into the system. We're all one. It's collective decision-making. You get that? It's huge, guys. This is huge. So, all right, so now you have a good idea of what Agenda 21 is. It is, as John McManus could tell you, it is being implemented in every corner of the United States of America right now. We are hearing things now, and this is also from the Poland conference. You're going to hear things like stolen land. There is a huge movement right now in the United States called stolen land. I was at Montana State University not too long ago. I like to see what college students are being required to learn. And I grabbed this book called This Land is Our Land, How We Lost the Right to Roam and How to Take It Back. In this book, this guy, Ken Ilgunis, suggests that there should be no private property anywhere. And if there is, that we have this innateness in us that we want to roam and we want to see what's through fences. And if someone, a politician, pushes a law, which I guess they have in Sweden called right to roam, that anybody can go into your private property anytime they want. Are you for that? Goes on to a couple other things. I read this book. He absolutely lied about what happened to rancher Lavoy Finicum. Lied in this book. So this is, for me, I can't wait to meet this guy because I'm going to call him out on the lie that is his book and go after him just like Willie loves to go after those guys. So anyway, the other things, every time I go into a college, I grab the books that required. Here's another one from Montana State, Energy, Environment, Sustainability. Here's another one, an introduction to conservation biology. And in this book, it doesn't take me very long to find where they start talking about Agenda 21. And yet you don't hear about Agenda 21 hardly anywhere. And no politician, no elected official in Washington, D.C. will talk about it. Why? If it's the truth and it's this big, enormous plan that every human breath has an environmental impact and through collective decision making, we must save planet Earth. Why aren't we hearing about these things? Do you hear my frustration? All right. To add insult to injury to those children, this is what these kids were yelling. Shame on you, stolen land, keep it in the ground. Keep it in the ground. What are they talking about? Fossil fuel. They're also going around saying we need to decarbonize the earth. You know my teeth are made of carbon? They're also saying we need to tax carbon. Your whole body is made of carbon. Carbon is a king element of life. This is huge, guys. And I don't mean to scare you, I mean to activate you. And I hope that's what we're doing at Camp Constitution. Anyway, here's a sneak peek.
Shame on you! Shame on you! Shame on you! Shame on you! Shame on you!
If I could stop that video, I would show you that the speaker there was from the Trump administration. This was the Trump administration's panel discussion. It was supposed to be, a room like this where people could ask questions, but these greedy, I'm not going to call them names, these poor kids, mostly from the United States, I just hope they're not educated properly, on what really is Agenda 21. But they totally interrupted the panel discussion. They stormed the stage. I went up, asked the United Nations police, why aren't they stopping this? They took a picture of my badge. They were going to turn me in and probably try to get me kicked out of the United Nations meetings. And if I pulled a stunt like those kids, I'd be out just like Lord Monckton. I'd be out on my ear in a flash. But they let him do it. They let him get away with it. This is typically what you hear. Here's another poor young chap who just simply, he speaks just in their talking points. And I challenged him. By the way, I purposely put him against the elevator. So we're standing on steps. But as you see in the background, all these United Nations attendees who say, we need to reduce our carbon footprint, put fossil fuel back in the ground, the hypocrisy of them.
The United States has big impact on whether the Paris Agreement and the rule book goes forward. What's your message to Americans?
Basically, this is time to take leadership. The United States have wanted us to take leadership for so many times, so many situations. This is the moment. The world is looking towards the US to create a positive impact, to make sure that they lead us towards a positive result and towards our future, a sustainable future.
And for those deniers out there, those people who just think that we're here and it's all a joke, what do you have to say to them?
Let's look at the science. It's pretty clear, everyone's agreeing upon it. We got 12 years and we need to take them.
I just was at a coal mine and I interviewed a geologist who doesn't agree with that. He adamantly says, look, the children aren't looking at the geology of the history of the earth and it's missing. So it was quite a fascinating interview with this geologist. So what do you say to a geologist who he got his PhD in geology and says Al Gore is lying? What do you say to people like that?
I think it's pretty clear that you need to listen to climate scientists, people who are experts in these things.
But doesn't the history of the earth and the core of the earth and seeing how...
All right, my time is up. Do you see, though, there are so many holes in what he's saying that I could challenge him? The more you know about this topic, and it is huge. It is so huge. How many think that this is a huge topic? It's like super important that everybody be talking about it. Let me just share this with you. There are so many, countless opportunities to challenge people, to talk to people, to have conversations with people about this. All the things that Camp Constitution is about is an opportunity to share what you're learning here and share it out with a world who is lacking education in so many important areas that all of us, I think, would agree we are losing our country. We don't have 12 years left. We have a few years left, if that, to save this country. Our history is short. And I don't know about you guys, but I sure hope that our history is long. This is not a left and right issue. You can go on YouTube right now and find George Herbert Walker Bush in 1992 and Nancy Pelosi in 1992 trying to push United Nations Agenda 21 in those very words, using Agenda 21 on YouTube. There is no reason you should be shy to speak out about it. But I declare that if we are not speaking about this issue, we are losing our country, because this is the monster in the room. So I encourage you to talk to your politicians, ask them about this, do research, because if Agenda 21 is implemented, Al, would you agree we're done?
But we're going to fail.
But we're going to prevail, and that's the good news. Just as there's a document here that Mert gave me earlier, and Mert's concerned about it. This is in Dutchess County, and Mert asked me if, hey, do you see Agenda 21 here? You could take your local documents and find comprehensive planning and all the pieces of Agenda 21. You have tools at your disposal 24/7 to combat this thing called Agenda 21. And we're not going to combat it if just a few of us are talking about it. So, will you all start talking about Agenda 21 and learn, actually, will you all start learning about it? Will you take that on, please, really? Yes? You don't have to, but I just hope you will. Anyway, I'm way over, Hal. Thank you very much. And we do live in the greatest nation on planet Earth. That's why, yeah, we do.